Okay, so let's get rolling. Homework for today was finish our parser, at least from an array perspective. Is that right? How'd that go?
Instruction didn't make much sense.
Well, I gave all the instructions here in class, didn't I? So I only had to give like Cliff's notes in the assignment.
I know that.
Or you don't listen in class.
No, I did. It's weird how you wanted it raised.
How did I want it with arrays? What do you mean?
With string arrays. Because you have in here make a new object, but you can't really store those.
Well, right. I gave you the halfway point for the assignment. Finish processing it and then into strings.
Yeah, but when I did the homework, the only way I could do it was removing half the code you already wrote.
Well, how?
Because it wasn't useful.
Well, no, I mean, so what do you think the assignment was?
Did
So,
you just want the actual like
whatever you did, I wanted something different.
okay. Whatever you did. Like I turned it into just arrays of the actual like smallest data point of the just the
So
itself.
I gave you this function, right? And this function's job is to collect all of the objects within this array. So we know if this guy's getting called, our string JSON is the entire JSON document, and we know our start pos is sitting there on, I don't remember if we said it's going to sit on the position of the opening square bracket or one past that position. I'll have to remind myself here. But anyway, you cut it. When we call get array, we're at the beginning of an array of objects, right?
Yeah.
That's the guy that handles arrays. So let me just quickly system.out.println json.char at start pos. And then I'm going to just add a whole bunch of asterisks to this so it stands out in the my print statement. Yo. So it stands out in my print statement. So as we're going through here, well, just as a quick reminder for, let's say, me and everyone else, we got our file, we go through, read it all in, yada, yada, yada. We call our my first JSON parser. Tell me about this parse function. Well, we know it's a function because there's opening, closing curly braces though, right? But now this function parse, do you think that guy's going to have static in front of it or not have static in front of it, and why? Right here, I'm using it. If I went and looked at the documentation for it, or actually, I look at our class that we wrote that, right? If I went and looked in our class, do you think I'm going to find the word static before that function? Or do you think I'm going to find or not find the word static before that function, and why? Yes, I am going to find a function. Any way you cut it, you're right.
Static.
Okay, why am I going to find static?
Parse data, you're using the class name instead of the method name.
Okay, yes. You said something weird in the middle there that we're just going to ignore. But yeah, so since we're looking at the way I'm calling it, and I'm calling this function using the name of the class rather than an instance of the class, I expect, unless this is an error, I expect to find the keyword static in front of that parse function because I've said this is owned by the class, therefore you call it with the class, not an instance of the class. So if we jump into my first JSON parser, which that's all we're doing out here, driver, is we're saying, hey, here's my giant string I read in from the file. Go parse this. So here's my first JSON parser. Here is, where's parse? Up here, here's parse. There's our beautiful keyword static. What does parse do? Parse takes in our JSON string. It, just in case, trims all the white space off either side. Since we're kind of just walking this thing character by character, if we can limit any extra space on the ends, that is going to benefit us. Even though this doesn't help us with any sort of extra space in the middle, we have to just burn past that. So what do? So we trim it, then we call get object, passing it our starting position, which is 1. Now, since we gave it a starting position of 1, that means that we know we're going to go ahead and burn past that opening curly brace, right? So position one's where this guy's starting. That's where get object picks up from. Get object is collecting an object. So get object's job is to collect a single object. All right. So it's going to go through from starting at start pause, keep going potentially all the way up to the end of this dude, right? Incrementing by one each time. Go ahead.
So if you're getting the object in the string, how are you supposed to get an object inside another object?
How are you supposed to get an object inside of an object? We would call get object.
Yeah, but you're saying it as a string, so you get the object that just goes inside the other one. As a string.
You're asking, how do I get the actual instance of the object?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I haven't asked you to do that yet. But the way you'll get, if we foreshadow a little bit inside of cruise ship, although we are already doing that, aren't we? Yeah. This guy takes in a string that's comma delimited. I'm cutting off my opening and closing curly braces from this. So I'm just going to give it a comma delimited list of things. Now, this is currently a weak version of this, because what I actually want to give it is I want to give it something for my parser that this guy can say the ship name is going to be like my first JSON parser dot get value ship name dot get value gross tonnage dot get value max passengers, rather than being reliant on these things being in a specific order. But anyway, you cut it. The answer to your question would be the constructor for cruise ship will process something that my first JSON parser is going to give it. Whatever format we take that in that allows us to effectively treat it as a dictionary. We want to be able to treat it as a dictionary. But we are trying to utilize as few built-in Java things as possible from the perspective of, hey, I might be working with a language that forces me to do this on my own. Plus, this is good practice for recursion and things like that. So we're basically just going to say, I assume we don't have any power tools available for us to do this. So we're going to just make our stuff work for this. We're going to make our own JSON parser that we can now take with us to any program, and with a little bit of modification, use that parser for parsing JSON in that program. Because our plan here is, after we're done with this and we're testing it with our data, we're then going to jump to an actual online API, the Pokemon one or whatever we vote on and do the death match thing for. We'll talk to that, which is going to give us JSON, and then we'll use our JSON parser, which you already wrote, to parse that JSON and give us objects. All right. So we'll keep going through. We'll start at bucket one. For the very first time, we're getting that original top level object. All right. So we'll go ahead and start at bucket one, keep going. If we hit an opening curly brace, what do? Well, an opening curly brace says we're looking at the beginning of a JSON object. How do we get a JSON object? We call get object. So this guy is going to call get object. Really, the way I would usually write this is this dot get object. But I like including this dot, even though it's not required in this case. Why isn't this dot required in this case? Remind me.
Why is it a dot required?
Why isn't this dot get object, what I have highlighted there? Why can I write it like that and I don't have to write it like this, which is my preferred way of writing it? Why don't I need this dot there?
You're specifying the scope of where you find get object instead of it clicking around to its global. You're pointing directly to it instead of having the compiler search.
Man, you're getting good at this today. You say just complete nonsense, and then you finish it off with mostly a correct answer. Just, yeah, we're just manipulating the scope or changing the tire. Yeah. You gotta pick up some couple of gift cards at Target. And then, oh yeah, it's a function. It's not that we don't have a more local scope. So we're just telling you exactly where to find it. Oh, I would say I would have given up on you mid-sentence. If ChatGPT was generating that, I would have hit the stop button. Is that? Oh man, that's wow. Okay. So in any case, we'll call get object. We'll pass it our JSON. We'll pass it the start pause that's one past where we just were. All right. So that means our pattern seems to be that when I hit an opening curly brace, I'm going to get that object right after that opening curly brace. So get object is going to make the assumption that I'm already one step into this object. Now go. Okay. So we'll get temp, get object's going to do its thing. Let's find out what its thing is. So in the example, so we just started another object, whatever. But if I didn't see an object, then here I'm at the end of this guy. So if I hit a closing curly brace, that means I'm at the end of an object. I have finished collecting my object. So what am I going to do? I'm going to return the string that is my object that I've collected. That is everything in between the opening and closing double quotes, right? All right, so now that's the guy that will ultimately get returned. Now let's just say that he got returned right here. Because the way we'd have gotten to that second part is we would have said get object. We would have gotten the object for a while, finally hit a closing curly brace. I have this string I've been building up. Now I'm going to return that string to whoever called me, which might be this guy right here. So now temp holds whatever object I just finished collecting because I hit a closing curly brace here. So now I'm back in my, this was a recursive call to this function, right? Passing it a different input, passing it, hey, here's my entire JSON string, just like we passed in our merge sort, our entire array. And then here's the part of it that we're focusing on. Okay, starting at bucket I plus 1. So this is going to build up that guy. This temp is not going to have opening and closing curly braces in it. It's going to have it's going to have the meat inside the opening and closing curly braces. I'll just have the middle part, which is going to be comma delimited name value pair stuff. However we want to handle that later. All right, but now I need to adjust my position of I. Because when I came in here and I called get object, and I went and got 40 characters, and it sent me back 40 characters. What I'm saying right here on this line of code, line what, 23? If I'm in 23, I'm inside the if statement of the opening curly brace, which says I need to go collect another object. So I'm going to jump into this get object. I'm going to build up 40 characters. That guy's finally going to return. So now temp holds 40 characters. But I'm inside that previous call to this function, which means I used to point to the beginning of the object that I just got. So now I have temp, which has, let's just use as an example, 40 characters in it. And what I'm going to do with that is I need to add the length of that guy onto my current value of I so that the next pass through this for loop makes sure it's looking at the next character after this object had completed. That makes sense? All right. So now I know that temp holds the collection of all those things. I know the last thing that I read in, well, the last thing I saw was a closing curly brace, for example, right here. And that guy did not tack on that closing curly brace. So what I have inside of S here, which is the same thing of what would be in temp here, is everything inside the opening and closing curly braces. So I'm going to say I is equal to I plus that length. So if I do nothing else here, the very next time through this loop, I'll be looking at a closing curly brace. Right? So I need to add one to this. See that comment there I have for possibly need to add one, yada, yada, yada. So now we walk through that, we see I actually need to add one to that. Otherwise, I just created an infinite loop where I'm just going to see a closing curly brace in perpetuity. Make sense? All right, so this will increment I to be one bigger than it used to be. This was us printing out those objects. I'm going to go ahead and take that out for right now. I'll come to you in a second. So then I loop back up through my for loop since this if statement just finished. And if we were inside that if statement, we're not getting into any of this stuff. So we hit the end of our for loop, we spin back up, I plus plus. Keep in mind that I is now bigger than it used to be. But keep in mind here, we have I plus plus here. So we actually already added that one. So right now I actually potentially skipped too far ahead by adding the 1. So we got to come back down here and say, oh, I only possibly need to add a 1 again. Probably I don't have to add a 1, since the next time through this loop, I'm adding my 1. Then I keep going through. We're probably going to hit a comma next. What is a comma? Because it's going to be a comma between objects. What does a comma do? Comma says, hey, ignore this, keep going. All right, go ahead. And skip like the middle part where you say nonsense.
Is the I equals I plus temp dot right statement there basically saying that like after we get to a certain point, then we're moving on to the next JSON object?
Well, yeah, let me kind of walk it out because I feel like dancing a little bit. So I'm chugging along. Anybody get that reference?
Is that a carnival reference?
No, it's actually not. I'm actually trying to think of the no, it's Damon Wayans from the movie Major Payne. You seen it?
Long time.
Yeah, he's telling the little boy a story. Major Payne's a great movie. He's like, Damon Wayans plays like this major in the military who's has like no personality, but he's just like a killing machine. But now he's working at some military academy training a whole bunch of kids, and this is not a guy you want training kids. Basically like me. You don't want my level of attack to children. Okay. Some of you cry enough, right? Yeah. So he's telling this little engine that could story to the boys like toot toot. And then he starts telling about some gorilla he killed out in the wilderness or something, scaring the crap out of the kid. All right. So, anyways, I'm sitting here. I just hit an opening curly brace. All right. I know I need to go and collect this next object. So I put this current call to the function on hold because this guy can't keep going yet until we've collected the next object. All right. So now this is my dancing part, right? So now I make another call to get object. I'm one step past that opening curly brace. So now I collect. Okay, so I collect. Finally, I get the closing curly brace. So what do? I bail. I say, I'm done. Return everything I've collected in between the opening and closing curly brace. So now I'm back to where I made that call, except now I'm holding in my hand what we stored inside of temp. I'm holding in my hand a string called temp that has a whole bunch of characters that I've collected inside of it. And we're going to just say in this example, its length is 40. When I went off to get that object, I collected 40 characters that were inside of there. All right. Now, when I come back here, though, the current value of I is the same value as it used to be, which was the one standing here looking at an opening curly brace. All right. But now I've collected everything after that curly brace. So what I need to do is I need to update this I to move past the end of that object so I can keep working on this JSON string. All right. So I am internally modifying my loop. Instead of there being just an I plus plus, I'm saying I equals I plus a bunch. Then you do your plus plus and we're positioned nicely. All right. So that's what's happening right here. I'm saying whatever I currently is, maybe that opening curly brace was at bucket 42. Now I'm going to add 40 to it. So now I'm at bucket 82. Then 82 becomes 83. And presumably, if we just think about what JSON looks like, bucket 83 will be a comma, the divider between two objects. What do? I continue. Remind me, what does the continue keyword mean other than the person, Carnival, who told me what continue? It was you, right? Shocking. Actually, it's not shocking. You're pretty smart. You're just not good. Yeah. Okay, I've almost had like 7 or 8 more of those. I would totally go on a Carnival cruise with you. I would, well, we'll say off the record, but it's recorded. I would totally go on a Carnival cruise with you. I just wouldn't bring my wife. I wouldn't subject my wife to Carnival cruises. I just have a feeling that we might have a decent time with Carnival cruises.
Are you paying?
What is the carnival queues? $50, $60? How much do they cost these days? He can he can sleep on one of the child bunks. All right. So what
Skip to the next iteration.
skip to the next iteration. So continue is like our hack to just, I don't want to do anything else in this pass to the loop. Let I go ahead and do its normal thing, but I need to move on. All right, so we're gonna just skip past that comma. I will do its I plus plus thing, so we won't be sitting at the comma again. All right, so now we're one step past the comma. Presumably now, where are we? We're at the beginning of another object, right? So what do I do when I'm at the beginning of another object? I call get object, yada, yada, yada. All right, make sense the loop here? Okay, so we're caught up. We're good with where we are before. Okay, so now let's back up a little bit to our example and let's insert our reality into this so we can deal with this else if right here, which was the homework, right? That he didn't understand. Just embarrassing. It's bad. What was up with Ben bailing on you? What was up with Ben bailing on you?
I don't know.
Embarrassment, right?
Yeah, it is. Text me like that morning. Like, okay.
He texted me that morning. It's like 5:15 a.m. Yeah, these guys are supposed to be doing drywall in my basement. They're bailing on me.
Hey, I didn't bail. That was him specifically.
I'll talk to Ben. Come do drywall.
Like doing.
Yeah, what else am I going to use young people for?
Oh.
I'm not paying them. It's not. I'm not like I'm paying them way less than I pay a contractor, but I also have expectations that are way less than if I were paying a contractor. No, I am helping them out. Well, I don't know about his situation, but usually it's, hey, I need some extra money. I have some extra projects. Everything works out.
I do need money. I'll take any work you give.
I understand. So just frame it right. It's not that Lippman enslaves his students to do stuff in his basement. That sounded weird on recording. That's this is that game of telephone. Where is it when people stand next to each other, just keep passing the message.
Children in his basement full of roaches hanging from the field.
In the end, I'm in the Diddy files. It's like, well, wasn't there the thing where the DOJ, this was for the Epstein files, they redacted it by just basically highlighting it in black using Word, so that people could just go in and highlight, take it off.
Pretty bad though.
Well, I mean, the whole situation's horrible. I don't think there's a correct way to navigate stuff like that that doesn't destroy somebody. So everybody's wrong in those situations. I don't know if there's a right answer. That's why we're in a fallen world and we have to kind of suck it up until things. All right. So anyways, let's deal with our reality here. So our reality here is we hit our original opening curly brace, which is the guy that got us into this original get object call. All right. So that's this guy right here. When we said parse, we know that every single JSON document starts off with an opening curly brace. We're safe there. That gets the ball rolling. This is like our first call to merge sort, where we said, hey, here's the whole array and go ahead and sort from bucket 0 all the way to the end. And then it took it from there and had those double calls to merge sort left half, merge sort right half, yada, yada, yada. All right, so we get the ball rolling by saying start with bucket 1. So we walk in, we're at bucket 1, opening curly brace, but well, actually bucket 1 is one past the opening curly brace. So now I'm here. And in our data here, we're looking at get object. What does this guy do? We are not looking at an opening curly brace. We're not looking at a closing curly brace. Remember, we're one past the opening curly brace. We started off at bucket 1 right here. So we know that when we get into our first call to get object, we are standing one step in front of that original first opening curly brace. So I'm not looking at another opening curly brace. And just as a quick reminder to everyone, this is what our data looks like. Okay. So when we make that first call, we're standing right there. All right. Is that an opening curly brace? I'm standing after the opening curly brace. So I'm currently in a space, right? So if I go back to my first JSON, is a space equal to this? Nope. 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 So what do? I collect the space. Loop back up, keep cooking, I++. All right, so now I hit the double quote. That's going to get into that else as well, right? So we're going to collect that, 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 we're going to collect that. Finally, I get to this line. So right now I have ships, the double quote thing. All right, so now I hit this opening array thing. All right, so that gets me right here. So if I'm standing at that opening square bracket, I now have the knowledge that, okay, I am about to walk into a JSON array. And what do JSON arrays contain? Two different animals can live inside of JSON arrays. JSON objects and other JSON arrays. All right. So we just happen to have a fairly simple version of this where we have a array, a collection of JSON objects. So we just have a whole bunch of JSON objects we're dealing with here that we need to process, right? All right, so I just read in this guy. So if I have that guy, I need to get an array. That's what this dude does, right? All right, so let's go ahead and add that in. All right, so if I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and let's just remind ourselves our current version of get array, unless we make changes to it, returns a string array. So I'm going to get back from this guy a string array. Presumably, it's going to be an array containing all of the JSON objects, but just the meat, because that's what our get objects get now. So when all is said and done, I should have a whole bunch of strings that are just comma delimited name value pairs. Make sense? That was the homework assignment. Get that string array. All right. So we're going to call get array. We're going to pass it our whole JSON string, and we're going to pass it our start pause. So let's go down here. We're going to say string array temp is equal to this dot get array, and we're going to pass it JSON, and we're going to pass it I+1. That guy? Okay. So we're doing that now. When things come back, temp is going to hold a whole bunch of elements. All right. Now, there's a couple of things. Here's the challenges of the assignment. So let's literally walk into it. So I'm standing at the opening curly brace. So what am I going to do? I'm going to call get object, but I'm going to pass it the entire JSON, but I'm going to say my starting place is actually right here. I+1, right after that opening square bracket. So I'm right here. So as I start reading in things, I'm going to get probably white space, white space, white space. So this is the reason why we trim things. Let's make sure. I don't recall for sure, but when we call get object. Well, but I want to think about like right now, I just collected while I was collecting the beginning of my first get object.
At the top of parse.
But I'm not calling parse on this. I'm calling get object. Right? I called parse, which started here. Parse did not get rid of this white space.
No, go to the my JSON parser. Go to the top. Get parse calling get object first.
Yeah. So so all that we've done is trim the ends of the entire document.
Oh.
Yeah. Now I have some white space in the middle of my document. So probably to be safe here, what we should do is whenever we come into get object, we should go ahead and trim. Actually, I'll tell you what, we probably shouldn't do it there. What we should do is when we return our object here, so this is where we've been collecting a JSON object, we should probably give them the trimmed version of that. That'll take any extra white space off the ends of this is a single object. All right. So, actually in this case, it probably wouldn't have made a difference, because, well, actually it would have, because we would have been collecting. So now I have a string. Finally, I get to this guy. And what am I going to call? So we've been collecting this I. When I get to this guy, I now know I need to call get object. So I call get object, I get this entire thing until I hit the closing curly brace. So that will be the string S that I've collected that I will return. So when I say return S, my current I had me right here. So I've walked, Ninja. I've walked that. All right, and actually remember, that's not actually white space. Well, it's not actually multiple spaces. I think that's a carriage return and a tab is what we have there. But they are characters. They're just invisible characters. All right. So really what we should say is if we have a comma, we should skip it. What do I do in an else? Else just says collect it. Okay. So I think s.trim is fine because we're going to be collecting some white space. Let's just roll with it for now. All right, so I'm inside my array. I'm supposed to be collecting some objects. So I need to hold a collection of things. How many things do I need to hold a collection of? Well, tell me about arrays. What's good about arrays? What's bad about arrays? What's our issue here? Say this again. They can't be changed. So if I make an array that has 10 buckets, and I fill it with 10 things, I can no longer fit an 11th thing, right? So from our perspective right now, back to our little dance, I just hit the opening square bracket, so I know I'm going to go get array. I call get array, passing +1 in for I, so I'm standing right here. How many objects are in front of me here before I hit that closing square bracket? We don't know. It's too far to see, right? We know we have a whole bunch of land to cover between me. I mean, we look at it. We have all of this land to cover before I finally get to this guy. And each one of these needs to be an object that we are going to hold on to. All right. Which means that if I'm going to finally return a string array containing all these things, I need to know what to put in there. How many elements I need to put in there? Well, we can guess. So we got a couple approaches to this. We could just say, well, our JSON parser only supports a maximum of 1,000 objects. We could say that. You don't want that one? Okay. Well, I mean, if we did that, we could say, hey, I want a maximum of 1,000 objects. Let's just assume I'll never have more than that. So hopefully nobody passes you a JSON document with 1,001 objects or more, because your parser will crash. Okay. Another thing I can do is what? I can go and say, okay, well, I know I'm in an array. I'm doing a collection of stuff. Before I get started, let me send a dude ahead and have him count the number of things I'm going to bump into, and maybe he can help out. Right? I could do that. So I can send some guy ahead and count the number of opening curly braces. But then I also have to deal with, hey, what if I have an array inside of array? Oh, this is a problem. Because now that guy, and this I think this might have been the I don't know what would you call it, like your cowardly statement? Is that how you frame it?
What?
Um,
Well, I have a solution here.
so I think the question he was asking is, how do we get objects out of these, the actual objects made out of these? Because what we're having to do with strings here has its limitations of, okay, I just finished doing a string. Now it's telling me to go into an array. It would be way more convenient if I could just create my instance of an object right now because I have everything I need for it and ship it off to someone so that I could just keep going and not play this game of collecting strings all over the place. Is that a fairly accurate assessment of what you were asking?
A little bit better to use dictionaries. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a totally different thing. I mean, dictionary instead of a string? Or you just want to translate your JSON into a dictionary?
Yeah, that's
Because it is a dictionary already. So you're going to translate from a dictionary to a dictionary? Or you just want to
like
you
that.
just want to put it into a Java object that knows how to hold a dictionary.
Yeah.
Maybe something like my first JSON parser that we're writing.
No,
Oh, you want to use a built-in thing. So I was right when I said cowardice.
no, no, no. It wasn't cowardice.
I feel like if we took a vote, I'd win.
No, 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 no.
Oh, I think maybe.
No.
I think probably actually. All right.
It's happening.
So that is a challenge.
The problem is like you get bring array, you can't put an object.
Yes, but right now we're dealing with strings. But you're right. The issue here is that because we are artificially just dealing with the strings in the middle, we're actually making this problem a little bit harder. Because every single time we get all the stuff we need to build an object, it would probably be in our best interest to go ahead and build that object, right? But right now we're still dealing with strings. So, and it's on purpose. So we have to deal with the limitation of this before we insert our actual object building thing here. I mean, we don't want to use a dictionary. We already have a dictionary. This file is in a dictionary. So turning this guy into a dictionary is the same thing as turning this guy into a collection of objects that we're going to store in something that effectively is as useful as a dictionary. Plus, we don't want to have to go in to the documentation and figure out, which Java object like map or something similar that allows us to create a Java-like dictionary. Let's write our own. We don't why go and search something when you can do it yourself, especially when you're learning, right? All right, so we don't know how many of these things we have in front of us, but when we build an array has the limitation of being fixed size. Now, we could decide that we're going to take kind of a hack approach to this, and we're going to say, oh, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build an array that has what I think is a reasonable number of things in it. And then what I'll keep doing is I'll just keep making it bigger as I need it to be bigger. In fact, we could even make an array that could just hold one bucket. And then once we need a second thing, we literally create a new array that can hold two things, copy everything over from the original one and put it into the new one, and then make our internal thing point to the new one. We could build our own factory that is incredibly destructive. But we don't care. We're on the outside. We're just saying, hey, here's another object to store. The guys on the inside, it's another one? Another one? Okay. So he builds one a little bit bigger than the old one. He copies the old stuff over. He puts the new thing there, blows that one up, moves this one over there. Okay. So these people keep building houses. Somebody says they want an addition. They blow up the old house, put in the new house with the addition, and poof, you got your new house. So we can do that. We can write our own version of that allows us to be destructive. Who cares? We got plenty of RAM. I don't care. Not going to be a problem most of the time. Okay. But at some point, we want to live in reality, right? What we just described there, does that sound like it's probably a bad idea?
Blowing up houses
I mean, it seems like if we know we're going to have, in this case, if we just eyeball it, it seems like we have 30-ish, 40-ish ships in here. So if we know we're going to have 30 things, and instead I build this super secret library, super secret class called, my elastic array, that inside of it, when you create it, it creates an array with one bucket in it, capable of holding one thing. So you add the first thing, it puts it in there. But then when you add the second thing, it says, oh, I don't have enough space. So I'm going to build a brand new container to hold two things, copies the one thing over, copies your new thing over, blows this guy up, moves this guy over here. So now he's holding two things. You now get your third thing. You say, my magic elastic array. Here's a third thing. He says, I got a third thing. I'm currently holding two things. I'm going to build something brand new that can hold three things. I'm going to copy. I'm going to place this guy there. I'm going to blow this guy up. I'm going to move this over here. Now I can hold three guys. Now that you know the inner workings of that, if you're the city inspector and you find out that that level of fireworks exists in that building, what we just described doesn't feel like a very efficient way of doing this, right? Okay, now, technically with computers today, it probably would still be fine. But if we want this to work for larger and larger and larger JSON data sets, eventually that inefficiency is going to bite us, right? So, as I've said before, write code that you understand. Don't try to write super optimal code. This might be one of those examples you run into something and you say, you know what? That makes sense, but that seems incredibly bad. That just does not seem like the way we should solve that problem. We've connected, as we've learned this stuff, we've connected our approach to these things back to how would we solve these things in real life? And often those two things line up. But this would be an example of we would never do that in real life, right? Just, we wouldn't keep building things that were a little bit bigger than the old one so that you can fit one more thing in there. Typically, if you had a shoe bench at your house and you had 5 pairs of shoes, you would buy a shoe bench that could hold at least 5 pairs of shoes, but you might buy the little bit bigger one to give you a little bit of growing room, right? Maybe 8 pairs of shoes, something like that. All right, so this approach doesn't seem real great. But at the very least, we've pointed out a limitation of arrays. Arrays are not bad if we know how many elements we're going to store. But in this case, we don't actually know how many elements we're going to store. And our best way of doing that is going to be to look ahead. And even that becomes a complex problem when we go to look ahead, because all of a sudden we have possibly arrays and more objects inside of those arrays, and arrays inside of arrays inside of arrays inside of arrays inside of blah, blah, blah. Just keeps going. So things are going to get pretty inefficient pretty quickly. So at this point, we might say, is there something built into the language that allows us to hold a growing list of things? Okay, well, so a default C-style array, what we've used with the square bracket stuff, that guy does not let you do it. Okay, we do have several different objects built into the language, and what we're doing here is basically introducing coding 3 in this discussion. So if we go back to our notes here, now you could have done this. The way I would have done this in the homework is probably to just build a array that can hold 500 things, keep track of the number of things you have in there, and then when you return it, you would either return with the number of things you just stored, or you would, once you return the array that was only a third filled or whatever, you would walk through it until you hit a null value, counting the number of things you saw, and that's the number of objects you got out of it. So as long as somebody didn't give you a stupid big JSON file, it would have kept working. Okay, so let's just move past that as kind of a ghetto solution and say, is there something out there that will grow as I need it to grow?
Strings can grow.
Well, that's true, but you already said there's a problem with strings that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but since we're already using just strings, just concatenate the object to a string. And then
Well, what do you mean? Oh, but I can't, that's not going to work in this. I'm getting an array. What string am I going to concatenate it to? Oh, you're saying as I get each object, just build a string of those objects.
Make a list.
Okay, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. So once we hit our next wall, we'll talk about our coding 3 thing. All right, I'm good with
No,
this.
we talk about- I want to hear. Coding 3.
Well, hold on. I want him to run into the minefield he's about to enter. So you want to just do this as strings?
No, I didn't say that was a good idea. I just said that was.
Well, let's go down. Let's go down this this fire
No,
pit.
I didn't say it was a good idea.
Okay, now we're right back to this cowardice crap.
Okay.
Let me just take us down the path real quick of why doing this with strings, given the nature of our data, is probably not the way to go here.
Oh, I know it's not the way to go. But
Well, let's just assume that you were doing this as an example for the class. You wanted everybody to understand this pitfall. So you weren't giving it as this is how we should do it. You were saying, hey, we probably shouldn't do it this way, but professor, you might be interested in sharing this problem with the class. That's what you were going for,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I meant.
All right. So here's the issue. And actually, this is a really good example. And the reason I'm doing this is this should feel tedious, but this is the way you used to have to do everything. You didn't have these thousands and thousands and thousands of libraries to pull from. Okay? Problem with Python. I mean, but it's true. No, Python is the old vibe coding. Because everybody's heard of vibe coding? Where you're basically using AI to write large applications. It's amazing. It is amazing stuff. I use it all the time, but I know how to code. Okay. And I know when that's the right tool for the job and when it's not. But if you start measuring your competency, I know I've said this before, but if you measure your competency based on your outputs, you run into a problem. Python is such an adopted tool. I mean, he's right. It's industry standard across the board. And because of that, everybody and their brother has already solved so many of the problems for you that you could just say, I'm going to load some random library and that thing can just rip through JSON or it can rip through an Excel document in no time. You just like, oh, I have it in an array. Whatever was happening behind the scenes, it just worked. It's great. I use it all the time. But we are at the point now where we don't want to use the power tools. We're like the Amish, right? we're plowing the fields with our oxen. Well, that's okay. So they're calling their oxen guy. Is it oxen or ox guy? Would it be you're calling your ox guy? Yeah. All right. So let's talk about this string pitfall. All right. So I have an array. I have a collection of JSON objects I'm about to collect. So one option here would be, especially since every single time I hit an object, let's not overcomplicate what our data could look like. Because right now we have very simple JSON data. We have a single array filled with a whole bunch of JSON objects, right? Even though I'm telling you this could get way more complicated and still follow all the JSON rules, we happen to know ours isn't that complicated. So let's just use ours as our example here. All right, so when I call my get object, what do I get? I get something that looks like what I have highlighted right there, not including the opening and closing curly braces on the end, right? I get that string. Okay, so now I have that string got returned from get object. So something he suggested is, well, why don't I just keep collecting them as strings? Okay, and there's going to be a way we can figure this out, but I want you to think about the possible pitfalls. I'll give you the hint. It's the same pitfall as comma separated value issues, CSV files. Well, we already have a semicolon in there. Oh, we have a colon in there. But you're right. You're right. So let's
a semicolon plus a bunch of other random characters.
But now we're back to the old problem. So let's get there. All right. So I go get my first object. I have a string. Now I'm going to store that string. So, temp equals whatever, temp plus equals start off as the empty string. And now I have this new string. Now I'm inside of an array. So now I need to go capture this string right here. That's going to be the second guy I get, right? That whole string. So now I have that whole string. So now we're going to decide, well, let's just tack that on to our old string. Well, my old string looks like this. If I just tack this guy onto the end of it, I'm just going to have this part butt up against this part right here, right after the 1. All right. Now, if I'm gonna, because I think the direction this is going is, oh, we've been introduced to that function called split, right? I think we split on commas before, right? So if I split on something that is, it has 3 elements separated by commas, I get a 3-bucket array. So we can actually let split do the work for us here, right? As long as I have a separator that cleanly separates my objects from each other. But whatever separator I choose, I need to ensure that that character or string of characters does not already exist inside of my JSON data. So I'm rolling the dice that I pick something random enough or weird enough or whatever to separate the data.
Not really.
Well, to a certain extent you are.
Well, can semicolon be, well, if you make it to where it ignores the string content of everything else, can semicolon be in JSON format by itself?
Well, but we're collecting into strings.
Yeah, but when you're looking for the separator, you can have it skip the.
No, but we don't have JSON components. Our strings look like this.
Okay, we'll just.
So we have a whole bunch of strings like this without the curly braces on it. I need to come up with some sort of unique way of separating those guys so that at the very end, I can call split and split them up. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can do that. So inside of this get array, we know we're going to be calling until we hit a closing square bracket. We're going to be calling get object over and over and over again. All right. And each time we're going to get a string back. Okay. And that string, we're going to save that string. Plus we need to throw these extra characters onto it. All right. So now we need to get creative with what our split looks like. You know, do we separate these guys? Let me just go into get array. Do we separate these guys maybe with, you know, so if we use, let's just keep it simple. If I use a semicolon as my delimiter, that means that my data inside those JSON strings can't have a semicolon in it. Is it possible my data might have a semicolon in it? That seems like it's in the realm of possible. All right. So we can just keep going down the line, going down the line. Now you can decide, okay, well, what about 3 semicolons followed by, you know, we have the winky face in there and then maybe a couple of equal signs and a question mark. What is the likelihood that I have that exact sequence of characters in my strings? Low, right? Would you say that it's low enough that we could probably trust that as a separator and likely never run into problems unless someone knew what our magical separator was and screwed with us? Started feeding us data with our magic separator in it? Okay, which I wouldn't put past people. You know, people do crazy things. So if we were thinking about like weaknesses in our program, that would be a point of weakness, right? Because we're inventing a separator and we just hope nobody else is using. This would work. Frankly, from a historical programming perspective, there isn't a problem with this. So actually, why don't we go ahead and use this as our example right now, and then we'll upgrade it. All right. So I'm gonna. We will. But hey, you're the one who talked us out of this.
No.
Hey, look, I don't make the rules. Apparently you do. It's fine.
I was playing devil's advocate.
Well, and now we're going down into the devil's pit, apparently.
Well, now I'm saying there's a terrible solution. We should do that.
This actually isn't that bad. We're fine. Are you okay? But we're gonna cut out the middle ridiculous thing?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
So what I did was I put JSON.length inside of my string array. And then after that, I started to use a while loop to.
But JSON.length is the length of the entire JSON document.
It works. Something I did, it might have.
Okay, well, now we're right back to that vibe coding comment I had earlier. Well, it works, so I totally know what I'm doing. Can you explain it? No way. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about Kool-Aid for a bit, and then I'm gonna say I compiled it and it worked.
No, but the thing is, I actually went through it and I have this if and else statements in here, where it's like if Jason dot rat start pause is essentially an opening curly brace, then what I'm doing is at that specific object array at start pause, I'm starting to get object and I'm adding the elements of get object into my array. So instead of like printing, array at index I using for loop, I'm storing my get object into that array.
At least a third of that was made up.
No, it's right here.
Oh, no, I was being generous when I said a third. All right, let's see how much this lines up with it. All right, so, oh man. And that's okay. All right, so let's walk through this. All right, so we're in our get array. We know we just bumped into an opening square bracket, so now we're going to go ahead and collect some objects. All right, so because we're going to collect this in a string rather than a collection because we have those problems with arrays. Okay, we've been informed that, hey, strings don't have that limitation of being stuck with arrays, and that's absolutely right. And I've also advertised that Java is a string-based language. So if you can get something into string format, you're in pretty good shape. So this is not a horrible, horrible solution. It's like a ghetto solution. But if you're writing this for yourself, what's the big deal? Once we get into the other objects that exist, they're going to be way easier because those solutions have already been made for us. But let's dive down this because, well, there's about 30 different things. Lists are the abstract type. We have linked lists, we have stacks, we have queues, we have array lists. Array lists work under the hood like arrays, so we have some of that inefficiency. Well, we'll talk about that. All right, so I now know I have a collection of objects I'm going to run into. So while I'm in here, I'm going to say while start pause is less than JSON.length, because we might be stuck in this string for a while, right? We'll break out of this loop when it's time to break out of this loop, but we'll say, well, start pause is less than JSON.length. We're going to be looking at stuff. So we're going to say if JSON at bucket start pause is equal to a closing square bracket. I've hit the end of my array, so I'm now done. Now we need to give ourselves a place to store this. So we had our string. We'll call this guy answer. We'll start him off as the empty string. Okay. Oh, is it? Oh, perfect. All right, so we'll start this off as the empty string. Presumably, we're going to be building this guy up, but if we finally hit that closing square bracket, we know that we can go ahead and return answer, whatever that currently holds. We're going to now go and start filling it with stuff. But when I finally hit the end of the array, my answer is inside of answer. I know you want to do a split, and we'll do that. Is that where you're?
You return split.
I understand. We're getting there. The reason I'm putting answer in there right now is if I forget to do that here, I'll get an error later. But we can go ahead and do it here because we just recently did our thing. So we're gonna say I want to split on. Was it already a? Oh, what'd you do? Why? Do you hate me? Okay. All right, so we're going to split on our craziness, which should give us an array of strings where we have the meat of each of our JSON objects in one of the buckets of that array, because each one we can, and we're going to see when we build this up, we're going to put that symbol thing, or this string we made. We're going to put that in there to separate those. All right. So otherwise, if I'm not looking at a closing square bracket, I actually might be looking at else if JSON at start pause is equal to an opening curly brace, what am I doing? I'm going to go into more objects. Okay, well, now we start running into issues because now we're going to stack the contents of those objects onto the same string that we're returning here. It actually won't work that way because we're going to be calling get object on this, and then we'll presumably be calling, if we're hitting a new object, we're also presumably inside of a new array. Actually, not necessarily. We could be just moving on to our next object here. So if we're on our next object here, before we move on to the next object, I need to put my separator in here, right? So we'll go ahead and say answer plus equals. Why does it want to put the extra stuff? Killing me. That guy. Because we know we're about to have another object, right? And then we'll say answer plus equals this dot get object of JSON passing it the current value of start pause. Now we haven't changed the value at start pause at all. And actually, before I put this on the answer, I'm going to say string temp is equal to this guy. Because after we've gotten that, we need to update our start pause to be the length of the thing we just collected to keep moving along. All right, so I'm going to say start pause plus equals temp.length. And I think we determined that it's not +1. Temp.length, yeah. All right, so start pause is equal to whatever it used to be plus temp.length. Now, are we okay changing start pause here? That's one of my parameters. Is it dangerous to change that guy? What if somebody else outside of this needs that guy? Pass by reference versus pass by value. This is an int. That's pass by value. I can do whatever I want to this copy of start pause. It's not going to break anybody else's version of it that they're working with. All right. So this is safe as long as I'm not breaking it for something else inside of my code here. All right. So we could have used another counter, but let's just use start pause until it seems to be a problem. All right. So we will update start pause accordingly based on the size of that object we just collected. All right. So now we have temp. We have our start pause being updated, and we'll go ahead and we'll say answer plus equals temp. We'll tack that onto our answer. Now remember, as soon as we started our opening curly brace, we tacked on our craziness. All right. Now, what if this is the very first object we run into? We don't need that craziness. We want our craziness to separate objects. So really, we only want to do this if answer.length is equal to 0. I'm sorry, if it's not equal to 0. So if it's not equal to 0, that means it's not the first object we've collected. Therefore, we do need to put the separator. Okay, if it is equal to 0, it's our first object, no separators needed here. All right. So then we'll go ahead and get our object. That's the meat between the curly braces. We'll increment our start pause to jump it down the line some. And then we'll tack on our that guy. All right. So that's what we do when we hit our opening curly brace. Now, else if. Hold on. Get object. It handles the closing curly brace, right? Right here. So it returns s.trim. So we've already burned past. The only way that guy returns is we got our closing curly brace, which means that we would never get a since this Where's my get object? Get object right here. He is the guy who will actually see the closing curly brace for that object. And he's going to send the trimmed version of the string he just collected. That's the meat inside of those curly braces. That's what he's going to return right here. So temp is going to be equal to that meat. But this guy, if we just add the length of what we ran into onto start pause, the very next character we will bump into is that closing curly brace. So we actually do need to add +1 there. So we bump past that closing curly brace because we are inside of a different function here. We don't get that I++ that we got inside of get object. That make sense? I++ instead of get inside of get object, that would have bumped us next to the, past the closing curly brace. We don't have that here, so we need to add our +1 to get past that guy. All right, makes sense. This is a good example of where you might put a comment in your code. Stuff like that, where you have some random +1, and you might want to remind yourself why you're just randomly throwing a +1 on something. That's a good use for a comment. Don't just comment your code to comment it. Unless you have one of those teachers, unfortunately, who said, I'm going to count your number of comments. And if you don't have at least 9, you're getting it -10 points. It's stupid. You can tell them I said it's stupid. Not kidding. Do it. All right. So now we've tacked on our answer. We potentially have our dealio here. All right. So we know that inside of this code, we're not going to be hitting closing curly braces. The closing curly brace is something that we slam into inside of get object. That tells us when the object's done. So in here, we're either going to hit opening square brackets, but right now we're writing this to simply work for ours. So a closing square bracket says that we're going to, we're at the end of this array, so we'll go ahead and return our array of strings. An opening curly brace says I need to go ahead and get the object, which will deal with the closing curly brace. Else if, what if I'm looking at a comma? If I'm looking at a comma, I'm between objects. Therefore, I just want to continue. Okay, so if JSON at bucket start pause. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to look at something. We're not returning it. All right. I am actually going to take that +1 off of there. And I'm going to fast forward to the end of this guy, the end of my loop. I already have, here's the closing curly brace for my loop. And at the very end, I'm going to say start pause ++. Pretty similar to what we did in our for loop. So that is the guy. This will move us to the next char, including bumping past closing curly brace.
So then without
No, we're still going to have that. I'm just putting at the very end of our while loop. If we're still in this while loop, we're incrementing start pause, because the next time through that while loop, we're moving on to the next char, the next char, the next char. That's what this while loop does, is it walks through our string one character at a time, every now and then jumping, jumping into the future. All right. So we'll always increment 1 here. This is similar to the I++ in our for loop. So this actually will handle that move past that closing curly brace. All right. But if the guy we're currently looking at is equal to a comma, then we want to just continue. But we have a problem. Tell me why this is a problem. It's a very fixable problem. If JSON at position start pause as a comma and I just tell it to go to the next iteration through the loop. Comma, 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 yada, 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 yada. So in this particular case, I probably want to say start pause plus plus. Move past this comma. That way we're not stuck in a loop. So we effectively want to ignore the comma, but we also don't want to have to bump into the same dude again the next loop through the while loop. Make sense? All right, so that's where that +1 goes there. See why drawing pictures and stuff like that. I would also encourage you to get up and like do these dances and stuff. It's fun. But definitely set up like a camera or something and include a YouTube video with your code. Potentially extra credit if it's awesome.
But it can't be like 5 points extra credit, though. We're putting up reputation.
Oh, if you're singing a Backstreet Boys song, especially I Want It That Way, I won't even look at your code. If it includes a video of you singing Backstreet Boys, I will not look at your code.
I will.
There's lots of videos of me out there karaoke doing that.
So instead of having our actual final, what you should do is you should have at least one person go up and dance for like an hour, like the whole length of the final.
There was a teacher that did that. I saw it on, I think, TikTok or something like
That's
that.
what I was talking about.
Yeah, where some teacher told a student to come up and do something crazy
Or do the final.
or do the final.
But they can't stop for that entire duration of
Yeah.
time that they're doing. They can't stop, or else everyone has to take the final.
Yeah, that sounds like cowardice.
No, but I think it sounds.
Oh, they were saving the rest of the class?
So
Oh, so they're heroic.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that is nothing Logan would do.
We should do that though, and make it even better.
Logan, I don't think would take care of the rest of the class. He's gonna climb to the top on the backs of others.
I would push them back down the hill.
All right, let's keep cooking. I only have 1 minute left. I hate this class. This should be a 10-hour class.
He's like, yes, string, and you're like, no string, and then he goes, oh, well, actually.
All right, well, let me get us to a good stopping point. Okay, so we just hit the comma. We're skipping past commas. That's not part of what we're building here. We're not going to have to deal with closing curly braces. Are we going to have to deal with closing square brackets? Yes, so that we already deal with the return. If we're in the else, so when we hit an opening curly brace, we're collecting stuff. We're collecting the next object. If we're in an array, we only have objects. So I'm either commas, beginning of objects, or closing square brackets, nothing else, right? I don't actually have an else. So as it sits right now, I should have collected an array of these guys. So when I break out of this while loop, when I'm past this while loop here, actually when this while loop naturally ends, and it'll end right here with the return, my array has already been kicked out of the sky. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a test array return, and then I'll give myself a bug. So when I run this next time, this is a
have a bug that I'll go past the return. You don't have a return at the end.
I don't need a return at the end.
Yeah, but when like
I understand what he's saying, that this guy requires you to return a value. It's going to scream at me if I don't have a return value, so I could just say return null. We know we will never get here. I'm outside the loop. So this is the ending of that while loop. The if statement ends right here. So the end of our loop, we always increment by 1. Loop ends here. When does it end? When we get to the end of our array for this guy. And we've made the assumption that we're dealing with legal JSON, because I'm going to look at exception handling at the end of this a little bit. All right. Questions, comments, concerns, bribes. All right. Front row at chapel if you're interested. Also lunch at 11:45 if you. 30 minutes. It's over before your next class. But we sit in the front row because that's where God sweeps through